Hello everybody, my name's Lorna Gold and I work for Faith Invest, one of the partners in the long-term plans programme. A huge welcome to everyone. Thanks for coming to join us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world, for the latest in our Faith Long-Term Plans webinar series. We really have a fantastic lineup of speakers this afternoon. But before we get into the speakers, we might just refresh our minds a little bit on where we are in this Faith Long-Term Plans journey. So as some of you will be aware, because I know that many of you have been at these webinars before, we're almost halfway through the webinar series on the Faith Long-Term Plans. But there may well be people joining us today for the first time, and that is just fantastic because the Faith Long-Term Plans programme is really one that we want to go out and to really see how we can really expand the number of groups, big groups, small groups, who are looking at preparing these long-term plans. So I'm just going to give you a tiny little overview of the programme to date and some of just the basic information on the programme before we come on to the topic of today's webinar, which is on partnerships. So why long-term plans and what are they, in case anybody isn't really aware? The long-term plans it's like a framework for ambitious faith plans for people and planet. The whole idea of the Faith Long-Term Plans is that they're faith-led. The partners who are facilitating this whole programme aren't producing the plans. It's the faith groups, it's yourselves that are producing plans, and we are here just to support and to help this programme happen. It's a partnership programme that's supported by many different groups and organisations right across the world from all the different major faith groups. It's been done, and the timing of it is important, it's been done in collaboration with the UK government ahead of the really important climate change COP, which is taking place at the end of this year. It was postponed from last year. And of course, we all know that the UN has declared this decade we're in now as the decade for sustainable development. And as faiths, all of us are asking ourselves, how can we contribute towards this 2030 agenda? What's our contribution towards addressing the many ecological crises that we face? And some of you are really veterans of these plans. As you'll know, this programme that we have this year is building on a very successful programme that was held in 2009. The timeline for the plans, for this round of long-term plans, we're in phase 1, which runs from now until September this year. And the focus of this phase is really to get people to sign up, to get organisations to sign up, to pledge your support for creating a plan, to review your previous plan and to learn more about how we can produce better plans this time round. Developing partnerships, which we're going to talk about today. And in September, or perhaps the beginning of October, we're going to launch those plans that have been pledged. So don't worry, you don't have to have everything done and dusted by September, but the focus now is on preparation. And some of you, I know, are well ahead in preparing plans. But the idea is that at least by September, you have pledged publicly that you're going to produce one of these long-term plans. And of course, then in November, we have the COP26. And we would really hope that by that time, we as different faith groups, there will be many commitments to tackling not just climate change, but all the different issues that we're facing in terms of the environment and environmental justice. Phase 2 then begins after October, where we get down to the hard work of actually the nitty-gritty of the plan development, if it hasn't already been done, and of course the delivery. We don't want these to be plans that sit on shelves, but plans that are supported by also looking at how these plans can also be financed and how we can use all the assets that faith communities have in order to have really workable plans. And hopefully that will lead to new frameworks, new partnerships. And if the experience of the last round of plans is anything to go by, it could even lead to new organisations being developed, new networks growing out of all the energy that the plans generates. The plans have 7 key areas, and these are suggested. Not every plan will have 7 key areas, but based on the experience of the last plans, 7 key areas seem to work for many of the faith groups who did the plans the last time. And this week, we're focusing on partnerships. And just to say that if you've missed any of the webinars on the Faith Invest website, you can catch up on many of the other aspects of the faith long-term plans, which we've already covered. Each of these webinars takes one of the focus areas and really hones in on how we can support each other and generate more ideas on how to produce really good plans. So the catch-up webinars are all on the Faith Invest website, and you're free to go and look at those at any point. And this one will also be up on the Faith Invest website shortly. So now to the meat of today's webinar, and I have to say I'm really excited about this one, because I think that when you start to talk about partnerships, you're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of planning, because partnerships are really concrete. They focus our minds on who do we want to work with to achieve these plans. And it's a recognition, I think, that we can't do everything on our own. No one organisation is able to address all the multiple issues that we are facing in terms of faith and environment, and how we want to address the challenges that lie ahead. We need to work in partnership. We need to build bridges. And as faith communities, we know that we've got many key strengths. Different faith communities have great strengths, whether that's our strengths as in and of ourselves as communities, whether it's the fact that we exist in every part of the world. We have many assets that we can use in order to bring about these plans. But we can also gain from building partnerships with others, with secular organisations in particular, from people who look at the problems the world is facing from a different perspective to faiths, and looking at how we can work together around those. So partnerships take many shapes and forms. We know that from working in our own organisations. So today we want to think about partnerships in 2 different ways. We want to think about different types of partners who we might consider working with in order to produce these long-term plans, with secular bodies, technical experts, development agencies. Who are the partners we can work with to help us? And then we might also want to touch on different kinds of partnerships, so the different forms that partnerships take in trying to achieve something. So some examples we might touch on are eco-twinnings, or formal agreements, memorandums of understanding, these kinds of partnerships, or also the value of loose networks. We partner with many organisations who we don't have a formal agreement with them, but we consider them to be our partners. And today's speakers, so we have 3 speakers who are going to kick off our discussion today, and we really would like it to be a discussion amongst all the participants. And you can put your questions as they come to you in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. My colleague Pippa will be going through those, and we hopefully will get to all the questions by the end of the webinar. So our 3 speakers today are Chantal Elkin, who's the head of Beliefs and Values programme at WWF, Sarah Ferguson, who's the director of traffic in Vietnam, and Alan Otaro, who's the founder and the executive director of the Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainability in Africa, CYNESA for short. It's quite a mouthful, the full title. So without further ado, I'd like to come to our first speaker, who is Chantal. So if Chantal wants to put her video on. Hi, Chantal, good to see you.
Hi
so
there.
Chantal, we'll put her biography into the chat box, but you're so welcome. And of course, WWF Beliefs and Values is one of the core partners on the Faith Long-Term Plans programme. So Chantal, you're going to talk to us in broad terms about the different kinds of partnerships and how it can help us in long-term plan.
Thank you, Lorna, and it's a real pleasure to be here with everyone. And I just want to thank you for your enthusiasm in developing long-term environmental action plans. It's fantastic. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So as Lorna said, my name is Chantal, and I run a program at WWF called the Beliefs and Values Program. And we're one of the key partners in the long-term plan program as well, along with Faith Invest. And really the bread and butter of what my program does is to bring together religious and conservation actors in partnerships for the good of the earth. And prior to working with WWF, I worked for many years with the Alliance of Religions and Conservation at ARC. And I just wanted to start off by saying that I've never seen in all of my 10 plus years of working in this field, such an exciting time for environment and faith partnerships. So there's so many environmental NGOs interested in this now. And there's the UN Environment Program's Faith for Earth initiative. There's the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. There are numerous forums and opportunities for collaboration. So there's a real spirit of openness and creativity now among faith and conservation groups that I've really never seen since I've been working on these issues, and it wasn't even present 5 years ago. So this is fantastic, it's refreshing, and it's really full of possibility. So WWF is one of the longest running partners with faith groups on nature conservation, and our work in many ways now is in support of something much bigger than our own conservation projects. And that is really supporting wider society to act to protect nature, because we recognize that it's only with millions more people becoming engaged in the environmental movement that we can really halt the destruction of the natural world and restore environmental health. So in our approach through the Beliefs and Values program, we really look at it as supporting faith groups as the real agents of change. And we aim to catalyze partnerships with conservation and faith groups, but very much with a light touch and trying not to be too prescriptive and to take a bit more of a back seat, while faith groups take the lead in calling attention to nature conservation and working in their communities on local action in the way that they feel comfortable. So what are some of the ways that environmental NGOs and secular NGOs can be helpful to you when you're looking at developing your long-term plans? Well, we can really offer, I think, some preliminary guidance and information and advice related to some of the most pressing environmental issues and priority geographic areas, etc. So if you don't have sort of ideas of which direction you want to go in terms of nature conservation, we can help provide some advice and guidance. We can also give some technical expertise in terms of skills building or the latest scientific methodologies. We can help develop resources like educational materials. In some cases, we can look at funding or doing joint fundraising, or just help to spread awareness about your best practices globally in other countries. What I wanted to do was talk through a few examples of WWF's work where we've been partnering with faith groups in Indonesia and Cambodia in particular. And I thought I would just kick off by sharing a few minutes of a video I was involved in developing. This was for a conservation audience about how to work with faith partners, but I think it could be a nice kind of introduction to some of our projects. And I won't go through the entire movie, but it sort of maybe starts a little bit abruptly right in the middle of the movie, middle of the film. So just bear with me as I start it from there.
The range of the tiger, for example, spans some of the most religious countries in the world. In 2014, Indonesia's most influential Muslim organization took the unprecedented step of issuing 2 Islamic edicts, or fatwas, calling on all Muslims to protect threatened wildlife and end the illegal wildlife trade as part of their religious duty. Another fatwa soon followed, prohibiting destructive forest and peatland fires. With support from conservationists from Indonesia's National University, ARC and WWF, 400 Muslim clerics in Sumatra and Java are spreading awareness about the fatwas amongst tens of thousands of people in their communities. Inspired by the Indonesian model, a fatwa prohibiting involvement in the illegal wildlife trade was also passed in Malaysia. Cambodia has one of the highest rates of forest loss in the world. Buddhist monks there have proved themselves powerful forces for conservation, acquiring legal protection of a 20,000-hectare forest, leading community patrol teams, raising environmental awareness, and significantly reducing forest crime. Wrapping their saffron robes around tree trunks, they bless trees and ordain them as monks, safeguarding the forest and the wildlife they shelter. Over 20 years, the IUCN Cultural and Spiritual Values of Protected Areas Specialist Group has developed many resources, including guidelines, to help integrate sacred, natural sites into protected area management. In 2016, the IUCN added Indigenous peoples organizations as a new membership category to help steer the global conservation agenda. Indigenous peoples, faith groups, conservationists, businesses, and government agencies are increasingly coming together to form new partnerships. How can we move forward together to meet the environmental challenges of our time? Cultural, spiritual, and religious leaders can appeal to the hearts and minds of millions of people, and conservationists can provide technical assistance to strengthen and support conservation initiatives. Together, we can transform our relationship with the natural world.
I hope you enjoyed that little clip, and thank you, Martin Palmer, for your narration. It's excellent. So I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about the Indonesia program, because there we started off really partnering with the Center for Islamic Studies at the National University in Jakarta, and specifically with the head of that center, Dr. Mangunjaya, who is an expert on Islam and the environment, and who knows the conservation world and the Muslim world very, very well. So through our partnership with him and the center, we organized a dialogue between the country's Islamic leadership and conservation groups. And we asked them to consider a Muslim response to the biodiversity crisis in Indonesia. And from that dialogue, that's where these 2 environmental fatwas emerged. The Islamic Council issued these fatwas asking all Indonesian Muslims to stop the illegal wildlife trade and stop the destructive fires in the country's forests and peatlands. So we were really amazed at this sort of really quick and very impactful high-level policy result of our initial partnership. And then we moved into a second stage of partnership in which the Islamic Council asked us to help raise awareness about the fatwas across Indonesian society. So we did this by helping them produce all kinds of resources that talked about the fatwa, like these sermon handbooks and Islam and environment handbooks and comic books for kids and environmental curriculum for teachers and awareness videos and a training program for Muslim leaders. We've trained about 500 Muslim clerics on the fatwas, and now they are preaching in their communities to thousands of people on the teachings. So while we're very much providing in the background kind of the support and the resources and some of the funding to disseminate the fatwa, it's really ultimately up to the Muslim leaders and the communities themselves to follow the teachings. So I just wanted to point out one more thing, which is I think one of the main factors in our success there in Indonesia has been that we've had an incredible facilitating partner in Dr. Mangunjaya, and he has just in a very harmonious way brought the conservation world and the Islamic world together to partner in a way that really fosters a lot of great and open dialogue. So when you're thinking about developing partnerships with secular organizations, I think it's really important to think about who is going to be the main liaison from your organization to the secular partner, and how you will communicate with them. I think communication skills are really, really important when it comes to this. In terms of our work in Cambodia, we had a similar model of partnership where we offered technical support and capacity building to our Buddhist partners, because we'd been working there with one group of monks on forest protection for a while, but we became increasingly aware that there were many other Buddhist monks who were leading environmental initiatives, but they were very hungry for more technical knowledge on conservation. So we decided to form a network of monks leading conservation projects across the country. And we partnered with an environmental organization in Cambodia to develop a Buddhist conservation guidebook, which has different modules related to Cambodia's conservation laws, identifying threatened species, looking at how do you handle wildlife that's been given to your temple or found in a trap, or what are the best practices in forest protection, etc. So we're developing these modules, and with them there will be training and capacity building programs for the monks. We're also facilitating a countrywide network, bringing together the monks so that they can share their experiences and learn from each other. And then in another role we're playing is maybe bringing to light in certain instances some issues that may be of concern, such as animal prayer release is a Buddhist practice in which animals are released from cages into the wild, which is a beautiful ritual and a beautiful intention. But the way that it's practiced now, millions of animals are being released into alien habitats, and it's really resulting in very high mortality for the animals and destruction of the natural environment. So we're bringing the network together to discuss this kind of issue and to foster a dialogue around what can some more sustainable practices look like. And then we're also helping the monks to capture their best practices and to share it more widely in Cambodia and outside of Cambodia. And I wanted to just mention one other sort of quite different model of partnership that we've been pursuing with faith groups, and not at the country level, but more at the international policy level on advocacy. Because we've realized that faith groups have been incredibly vocal and active in policy on issues of climate change and sustainable development goals, but not so much on advocating for nature and biodiversity. So we are now working with faith groups at the UN level in a new faith and biodiversity coordination group. And this is a sort of a forum where we can discuss faith-based approaches and concerns and etc. around biodiversity, and use this coordination group as a kind of a primary entity for faith advocacy on nature at key moments in this next year, such as the climate change talks and the Convention on Biodiversity, COP15. So, for example, in September, we had this group, and probably many of you on this webinar were signatories to this faith call to action to global policymakers to take more urgent action on nature. And at the same time, many of you committed to creating your own long-term environmental plans. So in quick summary, I think just looking at some essentials of partnerships, I think if you're interested in collaborating with environmental groups, it's just a question of maybe reaching out to a local environmental group in your area to see if they can have an initial discussion with you about priority issues and opportunities and locations. Maybe you just want to have an initial call to discuss ideas, or maybe you want to look at collaborating more deeply with each other on joint projects or fundraising or capacity building. And just to say that while I think faith groups and conservation groups are really natural allies, that these partnerships are still fairly novel. So in the past, there has been some difficulty in communication, and that's where a lot of relationships have broken down. But as I said before, I think if you choose the right sort of person to interface with the secular groups, and you think about the kind of what kind of dialogue and communication will really build trust, and what kind of language you can use, maybe more universal values language rather than heavily laden religious language, those kinds of things can build bridges. And then I just wanted to say that there are many, many conservationists who want to work with you. And an example of that is at the Society for Conservation Biology, there's a working group with hundreds of conservationists who are trying to engage with faith-based conservation. And they've even developed this document, rather lengthy, on guidelines for interacting with faith-based leaders and communities, which I'll post the link to that and the working group on the long-term plan website. But it really is a good document that lays out kind of a blueprint for how do you kind of initiate these kinds of partnerships, how do you manage them, and all the way into, all through the relationship building and managing and even exiting these kinds of partnerships. So I urge you to take a look at that. And I think I'll leave it there, but I'm eager to hear from you what kinds of support you feel you could benefit from as you develop your long-term plans. And we're here to help, so please be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chantal. I think it was really inspiring to hear just what can be achieved when people from different groups manage to work together. I think you've really laid out there the scope of what can be done, and how much is actually already going on. Of course, this webinar will be available afterwards as well, because I think that we would all really benefit from re-listening to your presentation. It's very, very rich. There's a lot already going on, and a lot of experience, certainly from your side, on how things can work and how to avoid some of the pitfalls of partnership as well. I'm going to move on to our second speaker, who is Sarah Ferguson, who is joining us from Vietnam. So Sarah, if you could put your video on now.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us, Sarah. It must be quite late at night there. So Sarah is the director of Traffic Vietnam, which is focused on monitoring. It's the network that monitors the wildlife trade, and Traffic has been working with faith organisations in Vietnam. And I think it would be great to hear from you, Sarah, a real kind of in-depth practical example of how you're working with faith communities from the conservation side. And yeah, just great to hear how it works in practice. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. While I share my screen, I'll start talking. Thank you so much for having us. We have been working with, as I'm going to go into, we've been working with the Buddhist community in Vietnam, and not really considering the broader context within which we've been doing this until we talked to Chantel and Martin about Faith Invest and these faith-based plans, and really gave us some scope about, more of the bigger picture and the global picture. So similar to what Chantel said, I think we have learned a lot about the work we've been doing and ways in which we are already considering expanding the work we're doing, and would be very happy to work with others and share more about our experiences and learn from you, as well as collaborate in any way we can. As Lorna mentioned, we are Traffic. We are an international organization based in Cambridge, UK, but we also have offices all around the world with about 150 staff members. Traffic works really with wildlife trafficking, which is where we got our name, and we work to ensure that trade in wild plants and animals is not a threat to the conservation of nature. We have what's called a strategic relationship, a strategic partnership with WWF, and so that's another way that we've been able to get involved with this. The illegal wildlife trade has been considered to be the fourth largest transnational organized crime. It's worth about $7 to $23 billion every year. It's a massive trade. The reason for this, broad spectrum of where it could, 7 to 23 is a broad spectrum. It's an illegal trade, so it's really hard to get a handle on. But we do know it's a very big trade. And some of these products that we're talking about, ivory, rhino horn, they drive international crime, they drive international terrorism, and some of these things are worth more than the price of gold. And then this year, one thing that I think we've all recognized, we've all actually been very closely affected by illegal wildlife trade. With COVID, we've seen how it affects not just human health, but economy, social movement, basically everything. But COVID is not the first zoonoses that we've seen arise from wildlife trade. We've also seen SARS and MERS and swine flu and bird flu, and probably it's not going to be the last one. So that's one reason that we really are taking this seriously and calling on others to take it seriously. Vietnam also is now one of the biggest destination countries for illegal wildlife trade, but it's also a source country and a transit country. So in Vietnam, so I'm going to tell you now a little bit about how we started to work with the Buddhist administration in Vietnam and the Buddhist community in Vietnam, which gives you a feel for how we've developed this partnership and where we can kind of go from here. So basically, we've been working since 2012 on an initiative called the CHI Initiative. We work with a target audience through social behavior change communications, which is this social marketing technique, on the largest user group of illegal wildlife products in Vietnam, which is the businessman. It's a businessman, middle-aged, about 35 to 55 years old, a high earner, and usually products are used to curry favor. And the reason that this is really important, and to show status and success and get in negotiating power at the table. And the reason that this is really important is because then our messages really have to match these motivations. So we're a wildlife organization, but we can't go out there and say, you have to care about wildlife. We have to match the motivations which are driven by power and success and prestige. So the first phase of our initiative was really introducing the campaign, was really just talking about chi. Chi is this concept of strength comes from within. So it's saying, strength comes from within, character comes from within, spirituality comes from within, but basically you got where you are based on your hard work and your network, and not from a piece of rhino horn, for example. Chi is also its own campaign. Doesn't say traffic anywhere on it or the donor's logo anywhere on it. And that's also significant because we work through influencers. We work through people who are influential to the target audience. So when we're working with business people, we'll work with an influential business person. So the first phase was really introducing the campaign. The second phase was then this drive towards aspiration. This person, these are people who are really, they're outside. They have extra money. They're, money to spend, so they can go buy it on big cars and go golfing. So this is really aspirational. But now we've got the third phase. Vietnam is in a period where we're in the third phase right now. Vietnam is in a period of global integration. It's called Vietnam 4.0. So it's this global integration. At the same time, we have COVID, and Vietnam has been really successful in getting rid of COVID. I mean, now we have some community transmissions, but we've had long stretches, months at a time, where we've had no community transmissions. So there's a real sense of national pride going on here as well. So with global integration, almost always comes this sense of nationalism, in a way, and national pride, and this sense of it sort of a tendency to try and understand your place in the world. And so we've been playing on that and saying, okay, what is our target audience's place in the world, and bringing that sense of pride to there. So with that, we help to identify the cultural roots. So taking a bit of a step back here, in the 1950s, Vietnam went through its communist revolution. And when this happened, there was a break from religion in general. So Vietnam was traditionally predominantly Buddhist country, but in the communist revolution in the 50s, people were unable to practice religion, and they were especially unable to practice Buddhism. And so in the 1980s, there was Doi Moi, it was called, and that was this opening of a slow opening of the world, which has been happening ever since, slowly since the 80s. It's been opening up till now. We've got this actual period of trying to reach out globally, this global integration period. And that means that people are at the same time trying to find their place in the world, but also trying to find their roots. And so people are turning back to Buddhism as the dominant religion in Vietnam. And they're starting to go back and understand, well, what does that mean? Which means they're more and more turning to the pagodas. So that really gives us a great starting point here. And especially with our target audience, that we're looking at this businessman, but also, his family and his place in the world. And then, of course, Buddhists are natural allies in the fight against wildlife crime, because this tenet here that I've put here. In Buddhism, humans and animals share the same natural continence. Compassion is central to Buddhist virtue. One should avoid causing the suffering or death to all sentient beings, and the law of cause and effect affirms the suffering of karma if one does bad things, including the direct or indirect killing of animals. So we've been using these influencers that are businessmen, but now we've been starting to work with our influencers as abbots at the pagodas. We started with the lunar holidays, which is when most people would go to the pagodas. We identified that about 70% of the country, even if they don't consider themselves Buddhist, they follow Buddhist teachings. And so a large proportion of the population would go to the pagodas during this time. And we've just started by just introducing ourselves really to these abbots and saying, this is the message that we want to see. It's this message of wildlife protection, of stopping the demand for wildlife consumption, and then recognizing, karma, what goes around comes around. And in order to do this, it's not a message when we're working with our business influencers, we can say, this is the message that we would like you to say, this is what we'd like to see on your social media. But obviously in this situation, we're working with people who know these messages better than we do. And so really it's us helping to foster what they want to see and what they want with their audiences and how they want to connect with their audiences. So we did things like sponsored vegetarian lunches. And it allowed us here to have our messages there, and to connect in different ways. Through this, we've worked with the VCBA, which is the Vietnam Central Buddhist Administration, and pagodas all across Vietnam to help create wildlife protection clubs. So even not just on these lunar holidays or lunar days, people of all ages get together and talk about different activities and ways in which they can be helping to protect wildlife. The messages are drive down status-driven demand from wildlife users by rejecting illegal wildlife products to personal morality. It's not just saying, oh, this poor rhino, but it's saying, okay, if you want to be a good person, then this is the way you need to behave. We've also been working with abbots on wildlife-driven coaching series. So, if you want to help spread the message, these are some of the ways in which you can do it. And then also the Buddhist, the VCBA and the various different pagodas themselves have been working through things like social media and their other messaging channels by integrating some behavior change messages on their channels to really reach all their audiences, even in the remotest areas. So this now spreads beyond just our original target audience. And we recently did a video, which unfortunately I can't show you because we're still waiting for approval from our donor. And so it's not public yet, but once it is, then I'll be happy to share it with Faith and Best to put up on their website. Hopefully that'll be soon. But we have a series of people talking to just explain this initiative. And we've got business people, we've got people from the Communist Party, and from our business government business group talking about what this has meant to them. And then we have the Venerable Teng Huan, who's a very high-ranking Buddhist leader in the BCBA, talking about what the initiative meant to him. And I took this clip, this is just a screenshot, but he says it's a necessity which highlights the potential and builds up the strength present within each person. And these are his words. There's quite a lot more that he says, but these are his words, and not our words. But he also saw the value in supporting the work that we were doing. So we took the good work that they have been that we've been able to do with them. And so another thing we did was once COVID developed and we were in lockdown, a lot of the lectures then moved online. The songbird trade in Vietnam is one of the most detrimental trades. They're caught indiscriminately. And so we have a thing that's called silent forest syndrome. And it's called that because you can walk in the forest in a national park and you won't hear a bird. You won't hear anything. And that's because most of the birds that you see in Vietnam you'll see as pictured here in cages, hanging in front of stores. And actually, because they're considered to be, it's considered to be good luck and spiritual to actually have a bird in a cage and not out in the wild. And so this is a really hard habit to break. And so when people went into lockdown, the Buddhist abbots were moved their lectures online. And so we worked with them to change some of the messages to be very specific to songbirds. And this allowed us not only to reach a lot of people, a lot of songbird buyers and sellers, which is really just about everybody in society. It's not really any specific audience that you can target. It's a really broad spectrum of society, but also allowed us then to be tracking in real time what people were saying about the lectures. And that allowed us also to gather a lot of really interesting information. And this is something that's ongoing, something that we're going to be continuing and trying to decide, trying to work with changing some of the messages, because it's a really complicated thing. Because even though in this case, even though we had these really influential, powerful people saying, these birds should be free, these are souls, we had a lot of people saying, but I'm actually better, it's actually better for them because I'm feeding them and they're not just starving out in the trees. So, these are a lot of messages that we're still having to figure out how to contradict. But we have done a respondents' attitude survey towards the killing of animals. We also did one towards the use of animals and trading of animals. But it's one of the most successful campaigns we've done. I mean, these influencers have been far more influential to our target audience, even though the messages aren't the traditional messages that we've been using. They've been far more influential than we've seen in the past. So, for example, when you ask the question, I don't directly kill the animals so I can still use their products, which is what a lot of people think. Oh, I didn't kill them, so I can still buy their products, I can still use them. That was 88% of the people we asked felt that way at the beginning of this initiative. And at the end of the initiative, only 12% of the people felt that way. Similarly, when asked the question, I totally agree and will not buy or use or gift wildlife products in all cases. 7% would not buy or sell or gift products in all cases, but now 58% are refusing to buy or sell or gift products. So that's, it's really, really great, powerful results. So as Chantal mentioned, merit release. These are some of the, just ideas and what places we can see going from here. Merit release, right now we've got the Lunar New Year holidays coming up. That'll start next week. And already we're seeing people driving around with motorbikes full of fish and turtles and these little cages with birds. And the idea is you're releasing it, you're getting good karma because now you're releasing a soul into the wild. When in reality, as Chantal pointed out, that leads to, a lot of these birds are caught again and again, and then they're re-released, and then they're caught again and re-released, and that's extremely stressful. They wind up, their reproduction rates go down, and they wind up dying an early death, frankly. And then a lot of these animals that are released into the wild, the fish that wind up in the streams and stuff, are invasive species, and then they wind up taking over the waterways or the skies of birds. And so it's incredibly detrimental, and it's something that we are hoping to be able to counteract. But not all wildlife trade is illegal. So I also wanted to point this out. What we go by the tenet, and this is from CITES, the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora, that trade should be legal, sustainable, and traceable. So as long as trade meets these three things, then it could potentially be actually quite beneficial. And I've put these two examples up here. Incense is often plant-based. And so if we can, if you can find plants that are, fragrant and can be sustainably harvested, that can actually be quite beneficial. And then this tree creates a resin that's called frankincense, also, which can be quite sustainably harvested. And both of these, if you can sustainably harvest plants or animals in some cases, you can then support poverty alleviation, and you can actually increase yield. You can increase forest cover, which supports climate change adaptation or climate change mitigation. So that's another thing that really should be considered too, because that really helps to support sustainable communities and not just climate change that can really have a lot of knock-on effects. And then this is my last slide. And the reason I'm leaving it with this is also just a screenshot from our video. And this is one of our businessmen champions. He's quite well known in Vietnam. He's on the Vietnamese Shark Tank. He's also known as Shark Hung. And the reason I put this up here is, as I mentioned before, people do not, we didn't write the scripts for the people who were talking in this video. They were just talking on their own. But his message is, I want to spread the message that if we live in harmony with others and do good deeds, good things will come to us. And so this is a powerful businessman who's talking about karma. He's talking about a Buddhist concept of karma, which shows that using this other influencer has really had such a profound effect on him. And now he, as a powerful, influential businessman, is spreading this concept, this Buddhist concept, to his people who he's now influencing. And that, what a powerful way to spread that message as well. So that's my last slide. Thank you so much. This is my information, and please do feel free to contact me.
Thanks, Sarah. That was just wonderful. I think it really gave us a real sense of what can be done when two quite different organisations, so you working with the Buddhists, come together. And the word that came to me was synergies. That I was trying to think, there's partnerships, but then when you form those friendships and you find those, as Chantal said, the facilitating partner, you build those friendships, then what can happen? And yeah, it's very inspiring to see. So thanks so much for bringing that to us. I'm going to move on now to Alan Otaro, who is based in Kenya. So Alan, can you put yourself on video now? Hi, Alan. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
Alan is the founder and executive director of SINESA. And we know each other from our work together in the Global Catholic Climate Movement as well. So it's great to see you here today. You're a veteran of long-term plans, I believe. You've done one before, and many good things came from that experience. So much so that here you are again, speaking on a webinar and going to do another long-term plan. So Alan, it'd be great to hear from you about drawing on your experience from the last time with the long-term plans, how you built partnerships, how partnerships helped you in making your long-term plan successful, and really what others can learn from that. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Lorna, and thanks for the invitation to speak. And I'll now just share my screen, but as I do that as well, also, just to say that SINESA is the Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainability in Africa, which it's a platform that brings together young Catholics from across the continent. We are organized into chapters. We have about 10 chapters now. And the idea really is to provide a space where young Catholics can collaborate together and bring their ideas, their talents, their experiences to work together on addressing the environmental degradation and climate change challenges that we face on the continent, but more broadly also across the world. So I'm just going to share some of the examples of partnerships that we've had and the experiences that we've had in the last years since we were founded. Okay, so I wanted to start with this Kiswahili proverb since I'm in Kenya. And this proverb says that umoja ni nguvu, utengano ni udhaifu, which means that unity is strength and division is weakness. And in this photo, you can see this image of a herd of buffaloes, chasing away a lion that was trying to hunt one of them. And so this really speaks to the context of Africa and the reality of the need to work together, which is very, very common here on the African continent, the inclination to just want to work with others and collaborate in addressing common challenges. But in Laudato Si, in the encyclical letter Laudato Si of Pope Francis of 2015, he also begins in the very first paragraphs of the encyclical letter to address this question of working together. And he says that all of us can cooperate as instruments of God in the care of creation, each according to our own culture, experience, involvements, and talents. And I think these three elements that Pope Francis mentions are also very essential, as we've seen from Sarah's presentation and from Chantal's presentation, that these partnerships and networks are also contextual to the culture and to the experience and to the involvement and capability of each of the partners involved in these different networks. And that's what you're going to see in the next presentation. So through partnerships at SINESA, we've been able to foster intra and intergenerational dialogue on care for a common home. As I've mentioned, SINESA is a network movement of young Catholics. So it's an organization that is youth-led and is youth-driven. And so it provides us also the possibility to engage in dialogue with the older generation, but also within our youth generation itself, because we work with young people in schools, but also young people who have out of school, like young adults. We've also been able to build capacity of young people on Catholic social teaching as it relates to care of creation, but also on the contemporary environmental issues that we address in our time, like climate change and biodiversity loss. We've also been able to engage in a variety of environment and development policy dialogues. We've been able to develop environmental advocacy skills and experience over the last few years through partnerships, as well as supporting young people in different parts of the continent where we have a presence to implement environmental projects. And just to go back to the intergenerational dialogue that I mentioned, to give an example, in 2019, here in Nairobi, together with the United Nations Environment Program, the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development of the Vatican, and the WWF's Regional Office for Africa, we came together to organize an international conference marking the 4th anniversary of the Encyclical Laudato Si, but also the 5th anniversary of SINESA. And the event attracted close to 300 participants, majority of them young people, but also participants from other Christian denominations, from other faiths and religions, people from the United Nations Environment itself, and people from other environmental organizations as well. We also had some participants coming from outside the continent as speakers to share their global experience and expertise of engaging in environmental work. And this event was focused especially on the how young people can get involved in environmental action, but also the synergies between faith actors, between scientific actors, between civil society actors, indigenous peoples, especially in addressing climate change and biodiversity issues. So this event was a good example of working in partnership, because the United Nations Environment Faith for Earth Office, which is a strategic office for partnerships with faith-based organizations, helped to arrange most of the logistics that we needed to be able to host this event at the United Nations complex here in Nairobi. While we had some funding support from the WWF Regional Office for Africa, which enabled us to bring young people from different countries to Nairobi to participate, as well as the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, which really helped us in developing some of the key themes around Catholic social teaching and around how we can work together to promote solidarity on these important environmental issues. On capacity building, we have a wide range of capacity building activities that are going on, but I just picked this one example. This was an event in Accra, I think in 2019 as well. We gathered some young people to have conversations on climate change in partnership with the Arupe Jesuit Institute, which is a social justice center set up by the Jesuits in Ghana. And in this photo, you can see both the banners of Arupe Jesuit Institute and SINESA, and Father Pani Adi, who is the director of the Arupe Jesuit Institute. And we were looking to also to be able to set up a chapter in Ghana. And we had worked together with Father Pani when he was a student here in Nairobi doing his priestly studies. And once he finished his studies and was sent to Ghana to work there to set up the social center, it was quite natural that we would be able to develop a working relationship, and that would help us then to set up a chapter of SINESA in Ghana. So you can see how one relationship that was nurtured here in Nairobi evolved into development of our own network in West Africa, in Ghana, through this partnership that began here in Nairobi while he was still a student. Environmental and development policy dialogues. So we've been able also through partnerships to work with different partners to enable the participation of young people in different environmental and development policy dialogues in different parts of the world. For example, you can see in one of the photos, it was a meeting of Catholic groups at the Conference of the Parties, COP25 in Madrid, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this was a meeting also organized by the Global Catholic Climate Movement, which happened also to be a member of the steering committee of this movement, which brings together many over 700 Catholic organizations all across the world, 900 I think at the last count, to work together on addressing the climate change crisis that we face. And in this particular meeting, some of the Catholic partners who are participating in this in the climate change conference came together to share their ideas and to see how they could synergize their advocacy positions and have stronger impact out of this meeting. And so some of the partners involved in this meeting were the CIDSE, which is a coalition of Catholic development agencies, the REBAC, which is the ecclesial network of the Congo Basin rainforest, as well as SINESA, as well as REPAM, the Pan-Amazonian network, ecclesial network for the Amazon. The other picture also is a meeting of the International Partnership on Religion and Development, or PAD, which is another important platform that brings together, religious actors, religious communities, but also governments and development agencies that are intergovernmental to work together to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, and to ensure that we can develop more deeper partnerships and working relationships to really work on the urgency that is required for us to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. And in this photo, you can see one of our colleagues, our Deputy Director and Country Director for Kenya, Ms. Helen Mugo, in a panel facilitating a discussion on distinctive added value of religion in development. And of course, in the slide behind them, you can see the importance of leadership, networking, trust, as well as other factors that work into this importance of networking and partnerships. So environmental advocacy training, we've worked with one of our partners in Southern Africa, the Southern Africa Faith Communities Environment Institute, or SAFSE, and for a number of years, they've been running the Faith Leaders Environmental Advocacy Training, or FLEET, which is meant to empower and give faith leaders the tools and skills that they need to be effective in doing environmental advocacy work with their communities. And in different parts of Africa. And together with SAFSE, we were able to host one leg of that training here in Kenya, I think in 2016 or 2017, in the town of Nakuru, and we were able to host some of the faith leaders from different African countries and to share with them concrete experiences of what faith leaders were doing in the town of Nakuru on environmental advocacy and some of the challenges on environmental issues that the town itself is facing, as well as in the context of Kenya. And of course, in this photo, you can see SAFSE's advocacy work in action, campaigning against the nuclear deal that the South African government was pursuing. And it's an advocacy action that was in fact very successful. Together with EarthLife Africa, they were able to have a court decision in their favor, stopping the South African government from advancing with these nuclear plants, and instead urging for development of renewable energies for the advancement of energy needs for people in South Africa. The other point is on implementing concrete environmental action projects. And in this slide, you can see that we were able to work in partnership with different partners to actually help and support young people who are keen to implement environmental programs in their communities to address the specific environmental needs that they can see in their communities. So this is Inessa, Cameroon, where we have a chapter in partnership with the parish in Douala in Cameroon in a cleanup exercise. Also during the pandemic, but still getting people out to be involved in community work, of course, also observing COVID protocols, wearing their masks and getting out in the community to do this work, also as a way of bringing the community together and to enhance, the spirit of solidarity during a time where many people were suffering alone because of the different, restrictions that have been imposed by governments, like lockdowns and so on. In the other photo, you can see a demonstration plot on permaculture farming, which we are currently implementing in the Catholic Diocese of Nakuru here in Kenya. This project is in partnership with the Catholic Climate Covenant in the US. The Catholic Climate Covenant, gave us some seed funding to help start this permaculture farming project. And the farm has been offered to us by one of our members in Nakuru, who is also on the board of Sinesa, Mr. John Gigi, and he's putting up this farm to provide opportunity for training to young people in Nakuru to see how they can engage in permaculture farming, which of course is ecological in its nature, and of course also looking at the issues of food security around during the time of COVID, which has had severe impacts, especially on incomes, but also on the supply chains and the ability of people to have access to affordable food. So these two projects are demonstrating of how we've been working together with other partners to implement this. And these are just a few examples that I was able to highlight in the short time that I have. But just to conclude that also, the different partnerships that we have described, you can see some involved external partners, or what you might call secular partners, that we've been able to join together and work and to deliver specific events like the conference that I mentioned at the beginning, the Laudato Si conference, but others that are more long-term, or that are meant to build something that is going to go on into the future. And our experience in terms of working with, for example, the United Nations Environment Programme and other UN agencies is that they already have a mechanism for engaging stakeholders and civil society actors, which usually mean that you need to have accreditation or apply for accreditation. And once that is processed, then it becomes easier for the UN environment and other UN agencies to engage with you as a partner, as a faith-based organization, to deliver on specific areas of partnerships that you are working on. And other partnerships are, to bring together and to have a strength. And as I showed in the first slide, in working together, then you are able to have a stronger voice. And that's precisely the idea behind the Global Catholic Climate Movement, to bring together Catholic organizations across the world so that we can be able to speak in one voice and highlight the impacts of climate change, especially on the most vulnerable in our society in different parts of the world, and also to help take climate action through different ways. Like the Laudato Si platform that is being prepared and being spearheaded by the Global Catholic Climate Movement, together with the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. So this is just an example of what can be done. This is also a fence construction of a project between Caritas Murang'a in the Diocese of Murang'a here in Kenya and Sainesa, Kenya. The Bishop of the Diocese of Murang'a provided land for us to have a pilot project where we also have a demonstration of putting up tree nursery so that young people are able to nurture tree seedlings during the tree planting season, that they can also sell to others, but also involve themselves in tree planting campaigns across the diocese. So through partnerships, we can overcome any challenge. And thank you very much for your attention. Asanteni sana.
Thanks, Alan. And I love that image of the child sitting on the back of the crocodile. If we have good partnerships, we can sit on the back of crocodiles then. That would be good. Okay, Alan, that was fantastic. I think what you really kind of gave us such a flavour of the different kinds of partnerships that are necessary to really succeed in our work, from those big networks engaging strategically and with some of those big partners like UNEP or the United Nations based in Nairobi, or some of these global networks that you can take part in, but then also the kind of practicalities of the kinds of networks you need to deliver very specific local projects and how they can feed into each other. And I think you also touched on some of the different kinds of relationships that you need to be fostering. Some are much looser. It's more about getting to know people, forming friendships, relationships, getting in the door. Other ones are much more then structured around funding, looking for funding opportunities, having the right connections at the local level. So thanks very much. That was really inspiring. So I'd like to ask all of our speakers to come back to put on their videos. We have about 20 minutes left for some questions and answers. And I know that there have been quite a few questions that have come in already. So Pippa works in Faith Invest, is known to many of you as well. So Pippa's been collating some of the questions. So what questions are coming in, Pippa?
We have, and we've had some that have come through through the chat as well. So the first one I will start with is from Maglu Mohammed from here, Uganda. And he asks, I think this is mainly to Chantal and to Sarah, in dealing with religious communities and leaders, do you have the same approach for all of them, or does it differ, and how does it differ? So
who wants to take that one first? Maybe
well,
Chantal?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it absolutely does differ. Very much according to the context and the religious group and what the partner would like to accomplish. So yeah, when we're working with very different religious traditions, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, etc., we're very much dependent, like I said, actually on our local partners and facilitator to inform us of the local context, and to really, again, I think it goes back also to what Alan and even Sarah were saying about having a really good process of like a good communication, open communication. And it's really about dialogue and understanding what both partners want. And I think that's true in any partnership, right? You need to have a lot of conversations. You need to have a very open atmosphere and understand each other and where you want to go. And then the flavor of your partnership really evolves from that.
Thanks, Chantal. Can I chip in there? Because I think one of the challenges that we're facing, and from what you're saying, it seems to be about, in those early stages, it's about building relationships, building trust as well. And Sarah, I think you highlighted that, the kind of establishing that trusting relationship. How do we do that in the current times where people are looking to prepare plans, but we can't really meet people in person? Is that something you've had to grapple with? Maybe Sarah, how do you build that in the current environment that we're facing?
I actually may be the worst one to ask because Vietnam's actually been less.
All right, you're okay.
Lockdowns on everybody. But in general, we do tend to, I mean, similar to what Chantal said, I think, and this isn't entirely answering your question, but, you know, we also have to sometimes go through an intermediary because we also have restrictions on how we can approach people as an NGO, how we can approach religious groups. We are a bit restricted also in this country in the way we have move around and operate. So always, even without movement restriction, COVID movement restrictions, we are a bit restricted in how we have to do. So we tend to have to go through an intermediary. So that is always an extra layer of how we have to build that level of trust. And so in a way, it also helps because it helps us to have that introduction. But we really do need to make sure that that trust is there all around with that intermediary, and they're presenting us well. And, you know, but then also I think I would also add to what Chantal said is that while there are you always have to approach and understand the culture, I think you also always have to understand that the people that you're working with have their own unique relationship with their congregation too, you know, and that you can't be too prescriptive with the way that you work with people and the way that you speak with people and expect them to then change the way they speak to their congregation, you know. So it really has to be this, you know, that's another way in which I guess you have to build trust, is to help them to understand that you're not there to say you need to do this, but to say we would like to support you in this work.
What else has come in, Pippa?
And then I suppose on the other side, we've also had a question that has asked, what have been the most difficult issues in creating faith and secular partnerships? And what are the best ways of moving through these?
Alan, do you want to take that one? Do you want to talk about some of the challenges you faced working with some of the secular partners?
Yes. In our case, we were only officially registered as a formal, legally incorporated in the year 2014, which means, officially speaking, we've only been in existence for 7 years, although we started back in 2012. And so that lack of, long profile that someone or a potential partner can make reference to, so that they have confidence to go into a partnership with you, was one of the major challenges for us, especially being a youth organization. So I think what helped us get out of that was our ability to show that, we are not just in one country, not in 2 countries, but in several countries. So, if the young people in Kenya are wrong, well, it's quite unlikely that also the ones in Zambia would be wrong. So you can have, some sense of, building trust. That there's at least more than one place or context that's involved in this. And then also the question of patience. Some partnerships, just evolve and work when they work. And the partnerships that we pursued, several years ago that, and at the time, it just wasn't at the right time to have a partnership. But several years later, quite organically, some of those partnerships just came to be, effortlessly, so to speak. But the fact that we had tried before to establish something, was helped, because then, people said, well, yeah, we do remember you had asked us about, doing 1 or 2 things together some time back. We weren't ready then, but it looks like the opportunity, has come. So don't stop knocking on those doors. If you suddenly believe that there is a chance for working together, and don't give up, because some of these things simply just take time to evolve. And of course, since we are talking about the environmental crisis, which also is becoming more urgent, is becoming more dire, I think more and more people are seeing the importance of having to work together.
And thank you, Alan. And Chantal and Sarah, we've had one that's asked, what do secular groups fear most in working with the faiths, and what reassures you as a secular partner?
I don't find that we're very, fearful or hesitant to work with faith partners, actually. We've only had very good experiences, very positive. And I think that really goes along with what Alan was saying. I think the partnerships that we're in have evolved really organically. And there have been other partnerships that haven't worked. Maybe when they haven't worked, it's they've fallen away, and we've built up other relationships with other partners. So there's something to be said for patience and just letting the process evolve in its own time. So I think that it's a really important perspective, and I think what might put off some other conservationists, from what I've heard, is some of the language, I think, can be difficult if there's a lot of very heavy religious language or dogma in the conversation. I think that might scare off some secular partners, but I think there's a lot of room for, as I said, sort of speaking in more universal values. So then that kind of language and communication can build bridges. So talking about how everything, we see everything as interconnected, and we don't want to cause harm to the natural world, like things that we can all get behind and rally around, and points of commonality, I think really help in that kind of dialogue.
Thank you. I would like to, I can see Hajat has asked a question and has also raised a hand. So Hajat, I'm going to click this button that says you are allowed to speak. I don't know if you can hear us or we can hear you.
Do you hear me, people?
Yes, we can all hear you. Please.
Loud and clear. I'd like to thank Alan, Chantal, and Lorna for the, I don't know, who is the third one, for the presentations.
And Sarah, yes.
Yes, yes. I'd like to find out from Alan, do you have a branch in Uganda? People, my question, you can now ask that question that I put in the chat.
I will, yes. Hajat also asked if she could have some more information on merit release. There's some more information to explain that whole process would be very useful. Thank you.
So there's a simple question for you there, Alan.
Yeah. Yes.
Are you in Uganda?
Not yet, though we are making efforts to do that. A couple of years ago, we had a collaboration and a presentation to about 80 youth leaders from the Catholic Diocese of Masaka. So they're drawn from all the dioceses there. And, at the time, of course, our hope was that that group will then lead us to setting up a chapter in Uganda. But as I mentioned earlier, some of these things, take time to evolve, and we are hoping that slowly we'll be able to make that work. So Hajat, just watch this space, and soon we might be, in a town near you.
And maybe Sarah, I could ask if you could explain some more on merit release, just so everybody understands.
Yeah, it's something that happens around lunar holidays, but primarily the Lunar New Year. So in Vietnam, that would be Tet. But it's this, it's idea that it takes the idea that, of karma, of good deeds will come back to you. And so in this, it takes the idea of, wildlife, animals being sentient beings. And so you're taking a soul that's captive, either in a small cage or in a small bowl, and you're releasing it into the wild. Therefore, you're essentially, in simplest terms, you're essentially doing a good deed, which then will bring a good deed back on you.
Thank you. I think we have time for just two more questions. We've got a couple of great ones. One we have on financing. So this was from Sophie Robe, who asked, it would be very interesting to understand how many of these partnerships are financed, and ask if any are supported by faith-based investments. Maybe Chantal?
Yeah. We do a lot of fundraising, both as WWF, but also jointly with faith partners and other organizations. So most of our funding for these projects actually come from either from government funding or private foundation funding. So yes, I think if you're looking at sort of more complex partnerships where there's a lot of activities or events that you're planning, and our projects usually run from a 1 to 3 year cycle, we are very much dependent on funding for this collaboration. But in other areas where it's more working in a kind of an advisory role, or just bringing people together virtually, of course, and having conversations, that doesn't take a lot of money. But yes, we're actively fundraising all the time for these kinds of partnerships and projects.
Maybe I could just say one word on that, just in terms of the webinars that are coming up. So one of the webinars, I'm not sure we have the final date, Pippa, you can tell us, will be on how faith groups can use their own assets, whether that's our financial assets or land, in order to finance these programs. Because one of the, obviously, the problems that we all face is that often implementing these kind of plans is dependent on external funding. It's dependent on grants and philanthropy, and obviously that's a major source of funding. But the work of Faith Invest, and part of the work of these plans, is to look at internally within the faiths at all the assets and also all the financial investments that faiths have, and to look and see, can they be more impactful in delivering the kinds of programs that the faiths themselves want to deliver. So that will be a really interesting webinar, when I think Pippa's put up the date for that. And we'll have some really good case studies on how faiths are reorienting their assets in order to deliver these kinds of plans.
And can I just add just a little, there was a nice little model that we experienced in the early days for the Cambodia project, which is an organization in the US, the Interfaith Power and Light, a religious organization, actually put on their website and spread news in their community that if they wanted to support the Cambodian monks, they could do that through small donations through the website. So I think they raised a few $1,000s a year, I think, for the Cambodian project. So that was a really nice sort of cross-religious fundraising method. So it's a bit more small scale, but it's a really nice way to rally your community.
Thank you. No, the financial assets webinar, we are still finalizing the date, but we will keep everybody posted. And we've got a really nice question here from Arthur Dahl, who asked if there are any online platforms that help identify potential partners on both sides, so from the faith and the environmental secular side.
I'll just step in again to say that we are working on that kind of a platform at the moment, and we hope by June it will be open to the public and will help really connect faith and environment partners. So watch that space. But I think the UN Faith for Earth initiative could be another good place. And we'll post some links, I think, on the long-term plan website, also with the, we can host a few, list a few forums and resources for you.
Thank you. And I don't know if we have time to squeeze in just one last question, Lorna.
1 minute.
1 minute, very quickly. So Eric asked, the idea of cascading behavior change is really interesting. To what extent do you think that behavior change can influence how investments are made in general? I don't know if Lorna, you want to maybe.
I think, yeah, it's a very, very broad question. I'm not sure how we could answer that in 1 minute. Because there's so much we could say about, I mean, the specific example that Sarah gave was very much focused on behaviour change in a very specific area. But maybe we could hold that question for now, and we'll bring it into the conversation when we're talking specifically about financial assets and how we could mobilise those around the long-term plans.
Thank you. So that's it for the questions then.
Okay, well, it just falls to me to say a huge thank you to everybody for participating in this webinar today. I think it's been really inspiring. Some of the words that stick with me are synergies, our trust, building trust, our finding a good facilitating partner, and patience. I think if we take all of those away from today, and really, it really points to the fact, as Chantal started by saying, that we're living in a very exciting moment, that this issue, or this kind of question of how the faiths can work with environmental conservation groups is really of the moment, and there are lots of opportunities out there. So I hope that you'll join us for the next webinar, that this has given you food for thought. The full list of webinars is on the Faith Invest website, and just say goodbye to everybody.